Welcome. Let's do this particular question called JLW, right? So, what do we need to do in this question is that we need to evaluate the comment of the export division manager that the net profit margin which is used to appraise her performance should be different than that used to appraise the performance of export division. Okay, so export division manager wants what the net profit margin used to appraise her performance, right? So she want it to be different or not. So 7 marks. So recommend using appropriate calculation whether the manager of the export division should receive a bonus or not. Right. Next thing is advise whether the use of EVA is an appropriate measure of performance for the two division. Right. So why EVA would be a better measure, okay, for the two division. Right. You are not required to perform an EVA calculation. Okay, no calculation is required, but that's for 10 marks. Okay, let's see. So what is it? So JLW manufactures what? Arcelic paints, and it sells to artists and craft shops in K-Land and Sealand. Okay, two places, K-Land and Sealand. So JLW has two divisions, domestic division and export division. Okay, let me just get rid of these things. And then all the cost incurred in K-Land is in K-Land dollars. So domestic division is an investment center. Okay, so that will have a little bit of implications. So it's an investment center, only sells to customer in K-Land. Okay, export division is a profit center, investment center and profit center, right? And exports all the products to Sealand, where customers are invoiced in Sealand pounds at prices fixed at the start of the year. So prices are basically fixed at the start of the year. Okay, there is no price fluctuations. Changes is not there, right? Objective is to maximize shareholders' wealth. So that could be EVA could be a better measure for that, right? In order to maximize shareholders' wealth. Next thing is beginning of the year ended. At the beginning of the year ended 31st December, the head office of GLW purchased a new machinery for export division, right, for 2.5 million. Okay, for export division at the beginning, which significantly increased the production efficiency of the division. The managers at domestic managers were considering purchasing similar machinery but decided to delay the project purchase until the beginning of following year. Why did they do that? Don't know. But why did they do it? Why did they delay? Why delay? Alright, so production efficiency increased. Okay, and then on 31st 30 June 20x9. Okay, so at the half of the year, right, KL weakened by 15% against the Sealand dollar, after which the currency rates between the currencies remain same. So basically your revenue is basically what it decreased, or it increased by 15% because it weakened against the SL, right? So what happens? It weakened by 15%. So since you're exporting it, you will be receiving more dollars, right? Because your currency is reduced, right? So right now maybe it's $1, but you will be receiving 1.15. Okay, since you're exporting it, right? Since you're exporting it. Right, next thing is the current performance appraisal system for the divisional managers are appraised on the performance of their own division and awarded a bonus if the net profit of their division exceeds 8%. Awarded large bonus, right? So managers of two divisions are correctly appraised based on performance. And so net profit margin exceeds 8%. Net profit is greater than 8%. Right, on being told that she would not be receiving a bonus for the financial year, the managers of the export division also commented that would not be receiving, and that she had difficulty in understanding the bonus calculations of her division. It's not based on traceable profit, so we might need to calculate that, right? So which would consider only items which relate directly to the division. She does not believe it is appropriate that the net profit margin used to appraise her is same as that is being used to evaluate the performance of export division itself. Okay, so she has been asked for a meeting with the director to discuss this further. The GLW directors intend to award divisional managers based on the basis of net profit margins achieved in 2016 as planned, but you as a performance management consultant for advice, so they have asked us for advice on the comment of export managers in advance of the meeting with her. Next thing is basically why EVA is a good way to evaluate and compare performance of two division. You're asked to advise on this, not to calculate. Okay, fine, that could be done, right? I just wanted to clarify this thing. Okay, I just wanted to clarify this thing, K dollar, this thing. Okay, I just wanted to clarify because earlier I did not mention it properly. So let's say K land and then dollar SL, right? So let's say currently you're exporting the same goods. So right now it's $100 and it is $100. That means it's going to cost, the real revenue is going to be same thing, right? But if your revenue, or if the currency weakened, right, our currency weakened by 15%, so 100 divided by 100 divided by 1.15, 86, or we could simply say 100 and then so you're charging your product at $100, right? So right now what's happening, your currency has been reduced by 15%, so that means it's gone down to 87, let's say, and right now you're charging 100, right? So you're going to be receiving more money because you should be receiving 1:1 ratio, right? So it has to be like that. But what happens, your revenue will be overestimated by how much? $13, right? So that's how much you will be getting more. Okay, that's how much you will be getting more. If it was import, it would have been a loss. Okay, if it was import, it would have been a loss. Right now you're gaining it. Okay, you're gaining. Next thing is we need to calculate the traceable profit, right? So because division manager is being assessed based on net profit margin, right? So that's easily doable because we've been given some appendix over here. And okay, what's the profit? It's 6,545, and what else? So maybe we don't need to provide her with this overhead 360, right? That's for the head office. Next thing is revenue occurs evenly over the financial year. The other overhead for domestic division include, okay, there is a revenue over here, we need to split this. So 4,000 plus 4,000 divided by 1.15. Okay, so we need to split that because there has been a change in the exchange rate after 6 months. Right, next thing is the domestic division include the creation of bad debt provision equivalent to this much to a wholesale customer who had financial difficulties during the year, and 90,000 for the paints launched during the year, right? So EVA, okay, so 75 plus 90 will give us 165. Okay, so right now it's being expensed, right, using net profit margin, but EVA will basically add it back. So cost of equity is this much, cost of debt is this much. Okay, so what do we need to do? Let's just look at the model answer as well. So remember, I told you we need to calculate the net profit margin, right? So split view, let me just pull up this thing, right? So first of all, so key concept that's being examined in the part A is controllability. So it's important to explain whether the managers should be appraised on the performance they control. In order to gain 7 marks, specific examples relating to controllability are required. Okay, however, it is important to recognize that determining what is and is not controllable can be difficult. Okay, it can be difficult, right? So in part B, you are expected to adjust the net profit and revenue figures for uncontrollable items and then draw a conclusion for the manager, right? Next thing is we need to give relevant examples to the scenario and need to recognize the domestic division is only an investment center, right? So which would suit to using this measure, right? Next thing, first thing we need to evaluate is evaluate the comment that the net profit margin should be used, or it should be different than to appraise the export division, right? So export division is a profit center, right? Next thing, so the key characteristics of divisional performance management is that division managers and the division themselves should only be appraised on performance they control, right? Performance they control. For example, costs which are not controllable, such as head office costs, should be added back. Should be added back, right? So head office cost right over here. And next thing is similarly, so export division is a profit center, right? So divisional managers are not able to control capital investment decisions. So capital investment decisions is not controllable, right? So we need to add back the depreciation as well. So even then, because you see, if it was controllable, what they could have done was they could have just changed the capital expenditure, which would impact the depreciation, and then they could have made the performance favorable, right, for their bonus target, for their bonus. But since it is out of their control, we need to add it back. Next thing is divisional domestic division is, however, what, it's an investment center. So the division is a cost they can control. That's a very different one. We are analyzing for both of them right over there. Right, so that's there. Next thing is, on 30th June 2015, so KL has weakened by 15%, right? So which means the export division has benefited from the increase in revenue, which was not in their control, right? So we need to deduct this from the revenue when calculating controllable net profit. Next thing, we need to the net profit arrived after items which are not under manager's control are added back is known as controllable profit, right? So this is what the divisional manager should be appraised on. So it's this is because it's unfair to appraise them for factors which are outside their control, which may lead to demotivation, and they may try giving up to improve performance, right? So which is not in the interest of JLW as a whole, right? Next thing, the divisional manager should be evaluated on all items which relate directly to the division, which is his traceable profit, right? So which is his traceable profit. evaluated on all items directly relevant to the division. So allocated head office cost do not directly reflect the activity of the division and should be deducted when calculating traceable profit, right? Excluded when calculating traceable profit, right? So traceable profit for export division when adjusting for allocated head office is basically 905, net profit 505, added back the head office cost, and then we got the net profit, traceable net profit, and then traceable net profit margin is 11%, right? 11%. So this is for divisional performance, right? So that's for divisional performance only. So as a difficulty with calculating controllable and traceable profit in this way, maybe it's difficult to determine which items are traceable or not, right? So which are controllable or not. For example, though the machine purchased for export division is by head division did lead to improvement in productivity, the extent of the increase must be attributed to the good management or otherwise by the divisional managers, right? So the increase in productivity is therefore partly due to controllable factors and partly due to uncontrollable factors, right? Basically there could have been better efficiency in the machine itself, or there could have been better management as well, right? So it's just hard to identify it. Next thing, recommend using appropriate calculations whether the managers of the export division should receive a bonus, right? So we need to calculate controllable profit first of all. So what's the controllable profit which was under this division manager's control, right? So we just need to, so then there is a net profit margin, and then a net profit margin controllable, right, by the managers of export division is 10%. So we just need to calculate that. Given it's difficult to assess the effect of increased productivity on controllable profit, managers should be awarded her bonus for the year. Okay, so we just need to calculate. Let's just calculate the thing as well. Controllable profit margin. So let's see. First thing we need to do is profit margin. Net profit, and then add back the depreciation. We need to add back the allocated head office because that's also not under her control, right? So for division we did not add back the depreciation because that was for divisional profit, divisional performance. For managers it's outside her control, so that's why we added back. Next thing we need to do is we need to deduct the currency, right? So for currency as well, in order to do that, we need to deduct the gain, right? So how much was the gain? Basically was we had 8,000 profit, we divided by 2, that will give us $4,000 per 4,000 or $4 million in 6 months, right? That was due to increase in currency gain, right? So basically if it was not for the exchange rate gain, it would have been how much? 4,000 exactly, right? But it would have been if it was not for the gain, it would have been 3,478. Okay, so the performance basically deteriorated. The revenue was lesser than the previous 6 months or previous 2 quarters, right? So it was only 3,478. Okay, 3,478. So this is due to they received that gain because it was the prices were fixed at the beginning of the year, right? So they were charging higher prices in that country. Okay, that's why they were receiving higher revenue. And when translated to the native currency, which is our currency, which has deteriorated, we are gaining how much? So 4,000 minus the differential amount, 522 was the gain. Okay, so that gain is already included in the profit, right? So we need to reduce that. So that gives us a net controllable profit of 778. And for revenue as well, we can just so since we are using net profit margin, which will be what sale net profit divided by your sales. But since we have a revenue which has which is not exact because it's 8,000, and that includes some revenue gains as well, so currency gains as well, so we just need to deduct it, and then we get our controllable revenue. So controllable net profit divided by controllable profit controllable revenue, which will give us a net profit margin of 10%. So since the target was for 8%, so she should be given her bonus, right? So because it exceeds the target of 8%, right? Next thing, there is some issue with this as well. So as the exact increases in productivity resulting from the export division is unclear, it's difficult to adjust the controllable net profit, right, to reflect this. So it seems that the divisional manager is benefiting from productivity improvements which are not entirely under her control. To reduce the controllable net profit margin to 8%, the threshold at which managers is rewarded a bonus, the net profit would have to fall by 778 minus 7478 minus that thing, right? So it would have to fall by this much. So how much should it fall by? It should have fallen by 179,760, right? And what was the COS, cost of sales, right? This would include 3.7% of cost of sales, which is 179,760 divided by 4,800, right? So that attributes to 3.7% of the cost of sales. So whether the significant, so it's not very significant, right? Just 3.7% improvement. So it is difficult to conclude, therefore, whether the significant improvement in productivity would make the difference between the managers of export division receiving her bonus or not, right? So it's not 3.7%. It's a little bit significant, but can't really be attributed to her only, right? So the 2% can't really be attributed. Next thing, let's talk about EVA. So EVA as a measure, right, for export and domestic division. So EVA makes adjustment to the financial profit to calculate economic value generated by both the division. So this makes deductions for the cost of capital invested in the division. So right, so it makes deductions for the cost of capital investment in the division. So positive, it means that it's creating value by those who finance the business. So in this case, it's basically so it would be an objective with the JLW shareholders wealth maximization objective, and appraisal of the divisional managers on this basis would align the managers with align the interest of managers with that of the shareholders, right? So EVA involves making many adjustments to the operating profit and capital employed, which may be time consuming and poorly understood by managers. So the manager of export division has already commented that she finds the calculations difficult to understand. Failure of managers to understand EVA would mean that it would be difficult for them to work towards target set for the division, right? Next thing, so EVA avoids distortions from estimate and financial policies. So EVA avoids the financial results from being distorted by accounting policies and estimated made by divisional managers. For example, right over here, remember in the notes, so the 75,000 bad debt in the domestic division, right, for the other overhead, right? Bad debt. In In the domestic division, as this would increase, provisions are added back to the operating profit, right, in the EVA calculation, whilst this provides a consistent basis to evaluate both of the division, right? So evaluate of divisions within GLW. And EVM is not suitable for comparing divisional performance as it measures absolute measure, right? So in terms of domestic division, they have a bad debt in which will be added back in the profit while calculating EVA, right? Whilst this provides a consistent basis to evaluate performance of divisions within GLW, it's not comparable. Why is that? Because it makes a absolute measure, or it's measured based on absolute values, right? So which does not allow, or which does not make any kind of allowance for the relative sizes, right? So one could be very big and then the EVA could be very high for different divisions differently, okay? So the capital employed as well could be different, so which would mean that the absolute figures will be vastly different, okay? It's not a relative measure, it's an absolute measure. That's the problem with absolute measure, right? Next thing, so EVA encourages managers to take long-term view, right? So the advertising cost can be capitalized, right? The managers would be encouraged to take such long-term approach and use or incur such costs. However, calculations of EVA is backward looking, okay? So it's based on historical financial information, whereas shareholders need information about future, so future performance on which to base their decisions, right? So it does not, it's a backward looking indicator, not a leading indicator, right? So it's a lagging. So EVA takes into account cost of capital, right? Basically, because NOPAT minus your cost of capital. So current performance of the net profit margin is a poor measure because it takes into account neither the absolute net profit achieved, the capital employed in the division, nor of cost of capital, right? So it does not take into account absolute net profit achieved, and then it also does not take into account of what the capital providers, right? So capital employed and then the cost of capital. By making deductions for each of the capital employed, EVA makes managers consider both capital employed and then cost of capital in the division. Export division is a profit center, right? So management do not have control over the investment, hence it's not a suitable measure for evaluation of performance on export division, because it's not controllable capital, because there is no controllable capital employed, because it's a profit center, which means they don't have anything to say about what kind of capital to invest. Next thing, in the domestic division, they are able to control investment divisions or control capital investment decisions, which means they have a controllable capital employed. Hence, it could be a suitable measure for domestic division, right? So, however, to use the WACC, right, in the EVA calculations require a number of assumptions and estimates to be made. For example, in calculating the cost of equity or market value of debt, right? So there will be number of assumptions and estimate which needs to be done. So WACC is normally based on historic data and may not reflect the circumstance in the future and may not be accurate as well, right? So 7 marks for the first one. Traceable profit was 2 marks. Next thing, currency gain was 2 marks. Controllable revenue was 2 marks. Controllable profit was margin was 1 mark, so 8 marks. Evaluation of EBA was 1 mark per point. Examiner comment was basically, in order to score well, it's important to pick up on the issue mentioned in the scenario and examine the impact on this question, right? So part B was generally well done. Part C was surprisingly weak, often due to candidates believing that the question requiring a lengthy discussion the method of calculations of the indicator rather than focusing on suitability for the use in the scenario. Okay, so what did they do? Um, Candidates believed that they required a lengthy description of the method rather than the suitability. Okay, so question was asking about whether it's suitable or not, but they were doing it differently, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. Take care. Bye bye.